Hello, baseball fans. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Tonight's video is brought to you by Glenn Smith Chevrolet GMC in Opelika. Let's get that another try, shall we? Welcome in On Deck, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking with us through the technical difficulties we've had. We're battling some weather where I'm at. We have been for a few days now. Everything's been just a little bit off here lately, so glad we got that figured out. Hopefully you can hear me and everything's good to go. We have a lot to talk about. We wanted to get on here tonight as soon as we could because you already know Austin Riley, right hand fracture. We all had a jump scare last night or yesterday in that game against the Angels. 97 mile per hour fastball off the right hand. That does cause a fracture. Of course, he is expected to miss 6 to 8 weeks with that. Just one of a multitude of injuries this year. And of course, we're sick and tired of talking about it. We're sick and tired of having to deal with this. But you cannot circumvent it. This is a reality. The Braves have had so many injuries this year, and I got on here a couple of weeks ago and told you that, look, I know things haven't gone as planned this year in terms of how the team has performed and in terms of what the expectations are and all of that, but injuries were the factor. That's who to blame, right? Everybody was pointing fingers, whether it be at Brian Snitker, whether it be at Alex Anthopoulos, whether it be at the players, whoever you want to point fingers at. But in my opinion, and it's still the same, we're pointing fingers at injuries because at some point, injuries are hard to hide, and the Braves have passed that by a mile. There's a total of 14 major injuries. When I say major injuries, I mean going on the IL or missing substantial time. I'm going to go through them really quickly. Not to bore you, but just to make a point. Of course, we all know about Spencer Strider out for the season with UCL damage. Ronald Acuna out for the season with ACL damage, torn ACL. Ozzie Albies has been out now for a month. Will be out for another at least few weeks with a broken wrist. Michael Harris just returned from the 60-day IL with hamstring issues. Sean Murphy hit the 60-day IL early in the season with an oblique. Max Fried, 15-day IL recently with elbow issues. AJ Minter is now on the IL, and he's got a hip issue. Austin Riley now on the IL, 6 to 8 weeks with a broken hand. Reynaldo Lopez just got back from the 15-day IL with a forearm issue. Pierce Johnson missed time. Not to mention Tyler Matzik, who was traded, to be fair, but he was out for the season pretty much. Jorge Soler has missed time since arriving in Atlanta. Orlando Arcia has missed time for the Braves. So that's a total of 14 players, not even mentioning how many games each have missed. That's over half the 26-man roster for opening day. Well, half if you're not including Jorge Soler. Either way, it is a substantial number of players that have been hurt for a substantial time this season for the Braves. And I'm not going to rehash what we talked about last week, but we do have to mention the fact that, no, I don't think this is anyone's fault. I don't think it's a conditioning coach's fault. I don't think it's, the player's fault. I certainly don't think it's Brian Snitker's fault or Alex Anthopoulos' fault. I think this is just a case of really, really terrible, I hate to say luck, because I don't necessarily believe in that when it comes to sports, but it's got to be. I mean, you look at what has happened to each and every guy this year. You know, who would have seen coming that Spencer Strider would be hurt in the first couple of starts of the year? He was a front runner for the Cy Young at the beginning of the year. Ronald Acuna, who, you know, reigning MVP, who would have seen that coming? You know, and nobody could predict what happened with Austin Riley here recently. So it's really terrible luck. There's no way around it. In terms of what I think the Braves need to do, I'm not going to get in depth about this, but I don't think it's firing anybody. I don't think that's how you navigate through this issue. I think this is purely you're running out of guys. You know, when Luke Williams is playing third base, things aren't going good, right? So I really believe that the path forward, because there is one, is the Braves have got to string together enough wins to either win the division, I say that because of who we face for the next 3 days, or you somehow make it into the postseason. With all of what you've lost, you somehow make it into the postseason, because at that point, you would have Ozzie Albies coming back. You would have Austin Riley coming back. And I think at that point, you'd have enough of a team to really threaten some folks. That team would still be scary, especially now that you have Michael Harris back, you have Reynaldo Lopez back. And I would feel less confident if we didn't have those guys back, right? If Reynaldo comes back and immediately gets hurt, or Michael Harris all of a sudden gets hurt again, or whatever the case may be, I think at that point, you know, it's going to be a tough sell. But I fundamentally do believe that the Braves still have a chance at making a run in the postseason. Now, if the division was the only way to the postseason, I'd feel differently. But even with all that this team has faced this year, they are still in contention. They are still qualified for the postseason at the moment. Now, that could change. This week is going to be huge for the future of this team this year. But I fundamentally believe there is still a chance. And they're 7 games back in the division. They're still qualified for a wild card. And I'm going to say this, and I know I'm going to probably get some flack for it, but I don't really care. I would argue, or you could argue, that what this team has done this year, right, with all of what they've lost, is borderline more impressive than what they did last year. Now, we all know what they did last year, over 100 games, setting records like crazy offensively, but that was expected almost. Everybody was healthy. Everybody had a great year, you know, and this year it's been the opposite. And the fact that, you know, the Braves are in second place, they're above 500 by 8 games, you know, the fact that that's the case, you know, it could be a lot worse, and I would argue that it's tougher to do what the Braves have done and stay trying to get, you know, wins and trying to be consistent than what they did last year. And they should be credited with that. If they make the playoffs, I think it's one of the biggest, you know, success stories with all of what they, again, have had to, you know, all the obstacles that they've had to go up against. I really do believe that. And look, you know, it's not ideal. It's not how we saw this season going. If you had told me in March that Ronald Acuna would be hurt in the first couple of months of the season, Spencer Strider would be hurt in the first week, I would have told you right then, man, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be a good mix for this year because of the way this team was laid out. We went through the opening day roster. So many faces on that roster are either currently hurt or have missed substantial time this year. And I told you, you know, back when that happened that, look, just because Spencer Strider's hurt, just because Ronald Acuna's hurt doesn't mean anything because of what happened in 2021. We all expected a big trade deadline. We got something. We got Jorge Soler, but we didn't exactly get the same set of cards as we did back in 2021 at that trade deadline. And again, ideally, this is not how this is supposed to go, right? Ideally, Ronald Acuna is here all year. Spencer Strider's here all year. And all these other guys don't end up on the 60-day IL or miss 8 weeks at the tail end of the season or break their wrist right before the end of the season like Ozzie Albies or whatever the case may be. A.J. Minter is all of a sudden hurt with a hip injury. So, you know, it's a tough way to go this season. And it's hard to watch. It's hard to see the guys who are left have to navigate it. It's really tough to me to watch Brian Snicker right now because he knows how beat up this team is, and he feels just as bad as anybody about a loss. Make no mistake about that. It's tough to see because there was so much potential at the beginning of this year. There was so much expectation at the beginning of this year. There was all of that at play, and we were right to expect that. How could you not expect that coming into this season? However, when you look at where we are right now, and I'll say this, I again think that the Braves still have a shot, and I think if they make the playoffs, this is one of the most surprising stories out of Major League Baseball in a long time. I'm going to just read the names again. Spencer Strider, Ronald Acuna, Ozzie Albies, Michael Harris, Sean Murphy, Max Fried, AJ Minter, Austin Riley, Reynaldo Lopez, and Pierce Johnson. They've all missed at least 10 games this year. And when you look at that, again, not to mention Orlando Arcia, Jorge Soler, and Tyler Matzik. When you look at that, what other team? Name me a team that could deal with that and still be qualified for the playoffs. And again, I know this is not what we wanted this year. Completely get that. However, I fundamentally believe that this team is so well put together that their depth stretches farther than a lot of other teams, and I don't have a problem in saying this. We're kind of spoiled in a way because of how good Atlanta has been over the last 7 years now, that we don't really, it's tough for us to see this and not want something to change, right? That's kind of what the conversation was last week. Everybody wanted Snicker to hit the bricks and Alex Anthopoulos gone. I'm here to tell you that I think there's a lot easier of a fix, and that is everybody comes back healthy, right? And if that's before the end of this year with some of these guys, great. If it's next year, then so be it. But for me, I don't think until Riley comes back, until Acuna comes back, until until Strider comes back, it's going to be really tough for these guys to make a dent in that Philly lead. It's not impossible because we've gotten it to be manageable. The Phillies have kind of helped out in that department too with losing. But for me, this is the way to the winning the division I see, right? We're 7 games back. There's a total of 7 games left between the Braves and the Phillies. The question in the title there, along with the biggest topic of the day being Austin Riley's injury, is can the Braves survive this final blow, this final injury to the Braves main roster, to the Braves starting 9? Can they survive it? I believe they can. They've survived so far with arguably bigger losses, at least similar losses to Austin Riley. I believe they can. And here's how, if I was writing the script to the end of this season, this is how I would draw it up. The Braves sneak into the wild card, right? They got Ozzie Albies back. They surprise a team and beat them in the wild card series. As soon as the wild card series is over, Austin Riley comes back, and he's hotter than ever, right? That's the only chance for this team, in my opinion. They've got to get some of these guys back, and it's going to be tough. They can count on their pitching for sure. I mean, Chris Sale is probably going to win some awards this year, if not the Cy Young. Reynaldo Lopez has already been an all-star. He's back now. Max Fried is coming off of his funk. Spencer Schwellenbach has been very reliable. Charlie Morton's still got plenty to give at 40 years old. There is a route here to winning ball games and entering the postseason and making waves there. But I think it's going to be much more difficult than it was before this. And I think it's going to be much more difficult with all of what we've had to deal with. And again, I think the addition of Michael Harris helps, because if you had told me that we were going to be out Michael Harris for the remainder of the regular season and Austin Riley for the remainder of the season, I would think this is a little too tough to get around. But if Matt Olson can fire up, if Marcell Ozuna can stay hot, if Sean Murphy can get hot, and Travis d'Arnaud, come back and be hot, and you get Ozzie Albies back, you have enough there, and even Jorge Soler, You have enough there to win ball games and make things happen. But it's going to be tough. There's no way around it. And again, I don't think that it's anybody's fault. I'm okay with saying that. I'm okay with dealing with the criticism from it. I don't think any manager, with all of the Braves have had to deal with, I don't think it's fair to any of them. I mean, it's tough for me to criticize a guy who's lost literally half his roster at one point or another this season and struggled to navigate around it and really has done it well. And a lot of folks are going to look at me and go, you think that the Braves have been managed successfully this year? Well, yeah, they've got 13 starters that have been hurt for significant time. They're only 7 games back. They're 66-58. That's 8 games above 500. They've won 6 out of their last 4 on the road. And the Phillies, they're keeping pace. The Phillies could have had every opportunity. They've been, for the most part, pretty healthy this year. They could have ran away with the division and at least left the Braves in the dust. But the Braves have not only beat the Marlins, who stink, the Nationals, who stink, the Mets, who are subpar, they've also kept pace with the Phillies. And, of course, the Phillies got off to a great start this year. Credit to them there. But here's the path forward again. You have 7 games against the Phillies. You got to win the majority of those. They have stiffer competition on the back end of this season. The Braves are going to have to string together some kind of lineup and put together wins, right? And at the end of the day, that's all it is. It's winning ball games. Now, head-to-head matchups, they count for a little more, no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, Brian Snitker said it perfect. He was asked, hey, you're looking ahead to 3 games against the division rival, the division rival that's leading that division. How much you're looking forward to it, how much do those games matter? He said, look, every day is a great day when you win ball games. Doesn't matter who's against. So hopefully the Braves can somehow manage to win these next 3 and really make a dent in that lead, because I think we all would love to see them win the division. No matter how you feel about the playoff format, everybody would love to see them win the division. However, any path to the playoffs for the Braves this year is a good path. And if they make it, I do believe this team is scary, right? Let's say you got a 3-game set in the wild card series. I don't care who you face. That lineup, even with all of what they're missing, especially if they get Ozzie Albies back and Austin Riley, you have Jorge Soler, Michael Harris, Matt Olson, Sean Murphy, Travis d'Arnaud. These are gamers. They are guys that can beat you on any given day. And I really believe that there's a chance there. Not to mention, you're going to have to face Chris Sale, Max Fried, and either Reynaldo Lopez, Schwellenbach, or Morton in a 3-game set. I would take my chances with the Braves there. So there is still plenty for the Braves to give us this year. I fundamentally believe that. Now, we're going to go to break, but before we do that, I want to say one last thing, I guess. Austin Riley, by the way, I know a lot of folks have criticized how he's played this year. I'm going to just say this. That guy has earned everybody's respect, and I'm going to tell you why. A few years ago, it wasn't that long ago, everybody wanted him traded. You remember back when we had Josh Donaldson and, all of a sudden Austin Riley wasn't hitting the ball anymore? You remember that? And everybody wanted to keep Josh Donaldson and find somewhere else for Riley to go. Do you remember that? Well, this is actually Austin Riley's first home run right here at Truist Park against Michael Wacha, I believe. This is my view of that. I was always a believer in that guy, and I always saw something special in him. And to see how he has evolved and to see how he has really come of age and become a leader on this team, I think says a lot. And there's been a lot of injuries to the Braves this year, no doubt about that. None bigger than this one right here because of his influence, not only on the field, but off the field as well, in my opinion. Now, that said, I still think the Braves are going to be able to do something here. I think they're going to make a push, but it starts with this series against the Phillies. When we get back, we're going to dive deep into that series with the Phillies and give you the pitching matchups and talk about what the Braves can do, what the Braves will do, hopefully, over the next few days. That is when we get back.
Are you ready to save big on a new GMC?
At Glenn Smith GMC in Opelika, you can own one of the best-selling vehicles in the USA. The GMC Sierra pickup is discounted up to $14,500 off. The roomy and comfortable GMC Terrains are up to $8,250 off. And the GMC Acadias with 3 spacious rows and seating for 7, discounted up to $8,000 off. At Glenn Smith GMC in Opelika,
Get ready to smile.
Welcome back. Now, we've been talking about where the Braves are at the moment and talking about what they're doing and, of course, all the struggles with injuries and, of course, the biggest one today being Austin Riley. But I wanted to talk about this Braves-Phillies series because every year over the past few years, I've had a calendar that I bust out and I circle series on it at the beginning of the season. Series that I think are worth going to. Series that I think are going to be big deals when it comes to either winning the division or, making a run in the postseason or whatever the case may be. And there's been 2 teams that for the past few years have been on that. And it's been the Mets and, of course, it's been the Phillies. Those are the teams. I remember back in 21, we clinched the division over the Phillies. I was there because I circled that game. I wanted to go to it. Now I circle games that I want to cover, right? I go at the beginning of the year. I'm like, all right, I want this game, I want this game, and I want this game because this concludes a big series that could decide either the division or could be a big push in the division halfway through the year or whatever the case may be, right? This series with the Phillies was circled a long time ago. Really, the final 2 series with the Phillies were circled a long time ago. And I'm not a genius because of that, but it's funny how we've gotten to this point. And it is 7 games back in the division. It is, 7 games remaining with the Phillies. And if the Braves were to win all 7 of those, that would be phenomenal. Odds are it doesn't happen, right? The chances of that happening are slim to none. But if they can win 4 out of 7 or 5 out of 7, then you're really talking about something. And, in the off chance that they somehow sweep both series, you'd be looking at almost a miracle, especially with where we are with the injuries right now. But I definitely think that this series is going to be a big one. Now, how are the Braves going to match up? Well, we got Zach Wheeler in game number 1. That's going to be a tough win. No doubt about it. Zach Wheeler's always tough on Atlanta. The good news is this series is at home, which I think will play into some kind of factor, but the fans got to show up. By the way, I will actually be there tomorrow night, not as media. I'm going as a fan. I got invited with some friends of mine. So if you see me, please do say hello. But Zach Wheeler on the mound tomorrow night against Reynaldo Lopez in his first appearance back after being in the injured list. Lopez, of course, will be looking for a bounce-back start, ready to go. At one point this year, he was leading the league in ERA. Hopefully that will, hopefully he'll still look like that coming out after injury this year. You hope that's the case. Never any guarantees. Speaking of never any guarantees, Max Fried, who's had an up and down kind of roller coaster ride ever since he came back from injury following that injury at the All-Star game, he's going to be facing Aaron Nola. And this is, a matchup I believe we saw twice now this year. Fried won, I know, the first one, and I think he can do it again. Max Fried, it always takes him 2 or 3 starts to kind of get acclimated again. I think he's going to be ready to go in game 2. We're going to need him to be. And I really thought the Braves may throw Chris Sale a bone in the playoffs and really may try to use him, or not in the playoffs, but in this series, and try to use him against the Phillies, because that's kind of what we signed him for, was for the big lefties. They did not make any kind of crazy moves to get him in the rotation, as far as we know. As of right now, it will be Spencer Schwellenbach facing TBD. We do not know who will pitch for the Phillies just yet. They haven't made that decision. We'll see how it goes. I don't know for sure. But Spencer Schwellenbach, what we do know is he has been great this year when called upon. He's had, plenty of downs. We can talk about that. But for a guy his age, for a guy who has, before this year had no major league experience, has been phenomenal, and it reminds me a little bit of Ian Anderson back in 2021, right? He's young, he's got stuff, the control sometimes isn't really there, but he's been really good. The problem he's had, at least early on, was the mistakes he made, which are common with a young pitcher, he didn't get back, to use Snit's words there. And he's really come into his own since then, and he's really been good. So in terms of the pitching, I feel good about Reynaldo Lopez. I feel good about Max Fried. And to be honest with you, I feel really good about Reynaldo Lopez. Now, the argument to that is, if I'm a Phillies fan, I'm looking at the pitching matchups going, well, I don't know who's pitching game 3. But I'll tell you this, I feel really good about Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola to front the rotation going into this series. I feel really good about that. We couldn't have drawn it up any better. So at the end of the day, you're kind of breaking even there. Now, the other thing is, the last time these two teams faced, the Braves were injured, but so were the Phillies. I believe they were missing Real Muto, they were missing Schwarber, they were missing Bryce Harper. I believe all of those guys are back. So they're not going to have the luxury of not having to face those guys. So this series, really to me could go either way. If I'm a betting man, I think you'd have to lean Phillies based on what we know. But I also think that, look, if Reynaldo Lopez is pitching his best stuff, if Max Fried is pitching his best stuff, and if Spencer Schwellenbach is pitching his best stuff, the Braves are going to have a fighting chance here. No doubt about it to me. If they all go 6 innings scoreless or only giving up 1 run or 2, the Braves offense is going to have a chance, especially when you look at, Jorge Soler, I believe, is coming back at some point, hopefully. But Marcell Ozuna has been great all year. You have guys that can create chaos. Ramon Laureano has been really good these past few days. I think there's a path to victory. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. The Phillies are without a doubt the tougher opponent here, but that's because of how hurt we are. If we were fully healthy, I think the Braves are a better team. When you look at the opening day roster compared to the Phillies roster right now, I believe that the Braves are a better team. But unfortunately, that's not how baseball works. Guys, we're going to go to break. When we get back, we're getting to your comments. Remember, Super Chats do get priority. And, of course, if you would, do me a favor, and please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay updated with everything going on here On Deck and, of course, with your Atlanta Braves.
Are you ready to save big on a new Chevrolet?
Make your way to Glenn Smith Chevrolet. Choose America's #1 compact SUV, the Chevy Equinox, discounted up to $6,500 off. The powerful Chevy Silverados are up to $13,750 off. And the big Chevy Silverado 2500 HDs are discounted up to $6,000 off. Glenn Smith Chevrolet in Opelika.
Get ready to smile.
Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're going to get into your comments now. We're going to get as many of them as we can. We should be able to get most of them, I would imagine. Abel Wall says, what will this do to the Braves in the playoffs and before? Always love your videos. Thank you for watching, Abel. You were the first comment of the night. Really appreciate you being here. Here's what I would say, right? In terms of what it will do to the Braves in the playoffs, first off, you got to get there. And this makes it a lot harder with Austin Riley being out on top of, Ozzie Albies being hurt, Acuna being, we can go through them all, but you get my point, right? This just makes it that much harder. And baseball injuries, like any team, any sport, it's a cumulative effect, right? They add upon each other, right? If you're missing one guy, it's not the end of the world. 2021, perfect example. We're missing Acuna. Okay, we can make do. We can figure it out. We can work around it. But replacing Acuna took Jorge Soler, Eddie Rosario, Jock Peterson, plus more, right? Adam Duvall. So that's one player. When you're missing 14 of them, it's hard to work around that no matter how good of a GM you are. So I think in terms of what this does to us, it's going to make us, probably a different kind of team. We've been counting a lot on the power from Olsen and Riley, and, whether it's been there or not for this year, or even Marcell Ozuna, I should mention him. But even if it hasn't been there between Olsen and Riley for the majority of the season, here lately, that's who's been driving in runs. And Riley seemed to just be getting hot, and all of a sudden, just like that, he's hurt. So in terms of what I think here, it's going to make us a little bit more of a, how the Brewers played not too long ago against us, where they just seem to get on base and tax pitchers and, that kind of, I think we may see more of that, right? Especially when you have guys like Ramon Laureano at the plate and, Luke Williams for the time being. In terms of Austin Riley's replacement, there's a few ideas out there. I've seen Yuli Gurriel. He's the first one everybody's going to because that's who's in AAA right now. Yuli is 40 years old. I am not opposed to trying Yuli out, but I also think that our expectations have got to be kind of low because he's not going to be Austin Riley. And really, anybody you get, Gio Urshela, for example, just got DFA'd by the Tigers. I think he got released outright by the Tigers. He's on the waiver wire. Anyway, he, even if we get him, great name, has had some great seasons. He's not Austin Riley. And that's pretty much the case with everybody that's out there that's available at this point, right? If this was prior to the deadline, you may have a little bit more wiggle room in doing something bigger, which at this point I think we would need. But even then, we only landed Jorge Soler. And I thought this, you thought this, we all thought that we needed more. Make no mistake, Double A probably did too. But what was available? And that's kind of the caveat here is what really is available. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. I think we'll see a move, not a trade or anything like that, obviously, but a move from within to figure out who's going to cover what, because I'd be surprised if they did Luke Williams at third base tomorrow. I think that was a yesterday thing just to get through the day. I would imagine you'll probably see something like Corey Carter said down there, put Whit Merrifield at third and maybe put Nacho Alvarez at second. Even I think Nacho is actually, I think he's battling some kind of sickness, right? I could be wrong, but that would be ideal. Maybe, you got to figure out something, right? I'm sure there's conversations being had within the Braves front office right now, just like me and you were talking about what they're going to do and how they're going to, mask the fact that Austin Riley is no longer at third base. But here's what nobody's talking about. As much as Austin Riley gives you offensively, which he does, there's no doubt about that, as much as he gives you offensively, he also gives you a defense. He's made some great plays in his career. Even this year, as recent as, a week ago, he's made some really good plays that save runs. And all due respect to Whit Merrifield, he's not Austin Riley. Not at the plate, not with the glove, in my opinion. He's a very good player. I'm glad we got him, especially considering where we are right now. But he was meant to, cover up the fact that we were down Ozzy Albies. That's why we signed him. Now he's trying to cover for Ozzy Albies and Austin Riley, and he's probably going to end up stretching himself thin. So it's interesting to see this. I'm curious to see what the corresponding moves will be. Obviously, Austin Riley, I imagine, will be put on either the 15 or 60-day IL, but we'll see what happens there. I don't know when 60 days ends. I'd have to look at that, but it's going to be right around the playoffs, and the fact that we're in the latter half of August, we only have about a week and a half and then a month before the postseason. So Austin, if he comes back this year, the Braves are going to have to make it probably a middle to deep run in the playoffs. I mean, this is a very serious loss in Austin Riley. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion. Corey Carter says we can quit right here or we can give it everything we have and try to turn the season around versus the Phillies, who we are 4-2 against this season. Yeah, I mean, the Braves have actually beaten the Phillies head-to-head. I still think, and I'll say it again, I still think that the team that started the season on opening day, before all the injuries, on paper, is better than the Phillies. Now, a lot's changed since then. I would say that the Phillies are probably better than us, right? But, and this is the positive side, but teams have been better than us before and we still beat them, right? 2021. Teams were better than us according to their record. Teams were probably better than us according to their talent. But we got hot at the right time and we were able to win. I think the Braves were far better than the Phillies last year. The Phillies got hot at the right time and were able to win. Now, the caveat to that is we don't have a lot of our playmakers. No doubt about that. But I still think there is a possibility here, and I will stick with that. Corey, great point. Scooter Puff says, I'll say one thing. Kind of glad Double A didn't go crazy at the trade deadline now. And see, that's fair, right? In my opinion. I told you that at the time. Like, I really thought he was going to do something at the deadline, and he did something. I thought he would do more. I expected a starting pitcher, and Really not for this year, because if you're a businessman and you're looking at this year, you have all these commodities players on your squad who are hurt. You know, do you really want to invest fully in this year, or do you want to wait till everybody's healthy and go all in next? I thought they'd get a starting pitcher not for this year, but more so for next. That didn't happen either, and I think it's because the market was what it was. Now that said, I think you're right. I'm kind of glad that he didn't do that based on what we know now, because here's the thing, right? We're sitting here and we're fantasizing and we're thinking about what could happen. The likelihood is slim. I think that's fair to say based on what we know all of right now. The likelihood of the Braves really making a push is slim. It's not impossible. 2021 is still alive and well, but it's slim to none. When you have all these players who are currently hurt, you have all these players who have been hurt, you know, you're getting some back, but you got to make it there before you do. You know, I told somebody, and this is kind of a weird one to use, but I told somebody, you know, I could see the Braves sneaking in and Austin Riley having just a bonkers series, right? And somebody was like, well, has that ever happened before? I was like, yeah, you know, Kyle Schwarber did it back in 2016. Didn't play, I don't think, most of the season, if any of the season for the Cubs. All of a sudden, he's ready to go for the World Series. So, yeah, I mean, anything's possible, right? It's just, if you get your ticket to the postseason, if you get the ticket to the dance, you know, maybe you bring home the trophy. But as of right now, I think we all do have to kind of look at ourselves in the mirror and go, okay, the season is what it is. The injuries are what they are. And expectations have to be kind of lowered, right? Because it's not fair to look at Brian Snicker after losing 14 players and go, why didn't you win 120 games like you did last year? Why didn't you do that? There's obvious reasons for that. But I do think that where we are right now and where we are in a month from now are going to be two different things. I think the Braves could very well make a run here and surprise us all. But, you know, that awaits to be seen. Scooter Puff says, if the Braves can just make it into the postseason, I'll consider it a successful season with all of the absolute nonsense we've had to deal with this year. You know what? I don't even think you're wrong. A lot of people would look at that and go, are you crazy? This team who's a six consecutive division champs over the past few years and looking for their seventh, you think just making it to the postseason is successful? Well, look, last year, if we're real, we all know that as good of a year as we had, just making it to the postseason was not enough. Right? It was not enough. Because of the year we had, the expectations were way high, right? We should have swept everybody in the playoffs. Now, if we make the playoffs, we got nothing to lose. The expectations are probably going to be pretty low. And, you know, the expectations were pretty low in 21 too, right? But we might just be those. You know, we'll see. Corey Carter says, and when we get to the postseason, you are going to want to win since we are there. Nobody will remember that we had injuries when they look back at the season, and no one will feel sorry for us. Yeah, I agree, right? Nobody's going to feel sorry for us. We are who we are, and we're going to be who we're going to be. And what I mean by that is who we have in our lineup is who we have in our lineup at this point. Trade deadline's passed. We can make moves through the waivers, but that's really it, right? You can't build this team up from the ground up. You can't, firing a manager is not going to make this team any better, and it's just not. And I don't believe that's the right move anyway. But that's just my opinion. Hey guys, please do us a favor. Do like the video if you can. It really does help out the channel. Really do appreciate that. Also, if you have not already, please do subscribe to the channel. We want you to be a part of the On Deck community. And if you haven't subscribed and you've been watching these live streams, what are you doing? Come on now, give us some love here. But yeah, please do like the video. It really does help us get this to a broader audience and helps us grow the channel. We're trying to get to 6,000 subscribers before the postseason, and maybe we'll see what happens afterward if the Braves do make it. But we're going to be talking about all things Atlanta Braves. If they don't make the postseason, we may find some other thing to cover. We may just cover the postseason in general. But we do yearly, we do this all year long, at least during the baseball season for the most part, from spring training all the way to the fall classic. We do it all. We are here with you. We want to be here with you. And I try to give you a pretty, fair look at what's going on with the Braves. I try not to be overreactive in the, in the sense of like a Frank the Tank or, Stephen A. Smith or something. I try to be kind of monotone and give you an actual analysis of what I see. And it's fair to say that the Braves have not met expectations. It's fair to say that the Braves have had a lackluster season. But it's also fair to say that, there's nobody really to blame other than injuries. But that's just my opinion. Let's see. Jackson says, it is impressive. No other team in the majors could be where we're at, having gone step by step through what the Braves have had to deal with this year. Completely agree, right? I said that earlier. You name me one other team. Maybe the Dodgers, but it only took them $700 million bajillion to do it. No other team's going to do this, right? And I'll give you maybe a team kind of like the Brewers, who I don't think are qualified for the postseason right now, but I give you maybe them just because you take people out of there, you can kind of throw others in. But you do this to the Phillies, they're not in it. You do this to the Diamondbacks, they're not in it. You do this to the Padres, they're not in it. The Brewers are qualified, by the way. You do this to the Dodgers, it's possible. But the Mets, the Giants, the Cardinals, the Cubs, none of those teams. And none of them are qualified for the playoffs. Think about what all hasn't happened to those teams, and they're not qualified for the playoffs. So you kind of have to appreciate almost, man, with all of what they've dealt with, they are still qualified for the playoffs. They're still winning ball games. They're still 8 games above 500. If you had told me that we would lose all these guys for significant time, I'd be like, well, I hope we have a better record than the White Sox, I guess. But, other than that, it's tough to expect much more. It is what it is. Scrolling down a little bit. Let's see. Trying to find a good question. Jeff Davis says we need to play different baseball. Can't live and die by the long ball. I don't disagree with that. I like I mentioned earlier, I think playing a little bit kind of like the Brewers would be a little better. And I almost think that, that kind of falls on, the smaller bats in a way, like the Whit Merrifields, the Orlando Arcias, guys like that to get on base and set up the long ball or set up a big hit and that kind of thing. But, yeah, I don't disagree with you. It may be time for a different strategy, but, we'll see how it ages. Guys, one more time, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel. All that good stuff really does help us out. We want you to be a part of it. And the best, easy way you can do to support the channel, just like the video. It's not that hard. It's just one button. Just one button. Just press the button. Carlos Paulino says, Tyler, I love your enthusiasm. It gives me hope. Well, I try to be inspiring, Carlos. I hope I give you something to hang on to. And, hopefully, we can enjoy something at the end of this year. And, maybe it'll be a series win of some sort. Maybe it'll be, maybe it'll be a World Series. Who knows? I'm not completely throwing that out just yet. Let's see. Mark Narmore. Olsen is a great first baseman. I don't know what you've been watching. Well, somebody's criticizing Olsen. Oh, Miguel. Miguel, you're always criticizing somebody. Criticize. That's all I hear out of you. No, I think, Olsen is, he's been doing fine at first base. I don't think there's any reason to move him from there, especially with all of what else we're missing. Miguel, I also see that you say Acuna is the only player that is irreplaceable. I'm going to tell you I disagree. I get where you're going with it, but I'm going to tell you I disagree. And I have a few examples of why I disagree. 2021, when he got hurt and they won the World Series, is the one everybody's going to yell at you. But I would say everybody is replaceable. Everybody's replaceable. Now, for per capita, Acuna might be irreplaceable in the sense of how many players do what he does and get paid what he gets paid. I'll give you that. But he is replaceable. Somebody else can fill that void if you raise them the right way in your organization and that kind of thing. But, we'll see. Scooter Puff says Spencer Schwellenbach is going to be a menace next year for this team. Another year of experience under his belt with his athleticism and wide arsenal of pitches. It's going to be something special. Yeah, I agree. I wasn't really sold on him early on just because I think we were all kind of on the Hurston Waldrop train a little bit just because that seemed to be the guy there in AA. But, yeah, Spencer has really taken MLB and ran with it. He's had his ups and downs. We've mentioned that, but he's been good. He's gotten better. You can see the development, and that's really all you can ask for out of a guy in his spot, right? You have all these expectations from fans and from the organization and all of that, and for him to be able to grow within himself and be who he has been, you can't teach it, really. I mean, you could teach him things to do, but you can't teach him that kind of responsibility and that kind of dedication. Let's see. Jonathan Yang. Recently, Harris coming off the IL last week. He had an awesome night in his first night, and since he came back, we've been winning majority of the games, so I think that the Braves have a chance to do something. Yeah, look, I agree. And that's kind of why I said earlier, if Harris wasn't back, I'd feel differently. I'd really feel like, oh, man, this season is just in the can, and it is what – I mean, we're pretty much our entire lineup is hurt, but – it's also, it's going to be a tough ride. We're going to have pain. We're going to have growing pains. We're going to have just times where it's like, gosh, man, I wish we were back in 2023. It's not going to feel, there were all these comparisons to 2021 back early in the season, especially after Acuna got hurt, because that's kind of the catalyst to make what happened back in that year. But since the trade deadline, this hasn't been real similar. We're still getting hurt. We're not having this magical run to win the division. It's been more along the lines of just downhill. And through that downhill of people getting hurt, the Braves have won 6 out of their last 4, probably should have won 7 out of those last 10, or 6 out of the last 10, and they probably should have been 7-3 in those 10. So, it's tough to watch, but at the end of the day, it's I will stick with the fact that I think it's I think it's fair to say that this year's team is more honestly more impressive doing what they've done, and especially if they make the playoffs. If they make the playoffs with all of what they've lost this year, it's borderline more impressive than what they did in 23. Now, will they think that? No, but I think that just because all of what they've had to, go against. ESPN has Sanchez listed against Schwellenbach for the third game in this series. Well, probable pitchers, when I Googled it, did not have anybody. Christopher Sanchez will be taking a mound against Schwellenbach for Game 3. Yeah, we'll see. Broglesby, I see you say there, pitch Sale in Game 3. I would like us to be honest, but here's the other caveat to that. If you don't pitch Sale here, and I don't know if he's faced him this year or not, but this really just hit my mind. Let me look something up. If you don't pitch Sale here, you limit how much the Phillies staff gets to see him prior to the postseason. Now, they can look at video, they can look at, they can look at all that, but at the end of the day, there's nothing like seeing, up close and personal what a guy is by facing him. And if you can limit that prior to the postseason, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The only thing about it is I personally would have liked to have seen him. So, yeah, he faced them back on March 31st. Atlanta at Philadelphia. We lost that game. He threw 5 1/3, 7 strikeouts. He gave up a homer. Since then, I'm looking, he has not faced him. So it could be that Chris Sale does not face them except for pretty much opening day or the opening series, and then the final series that we face of the year. And that's the only time these teams or this team gets to see him prior to the postseason, which I'm okay with that if we win. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Oh Lord. A lot of folks in the chat tonight, really do appreciate it. We're going to get out of here in a minute. I'm going to try to get through as many of these as I can. Jeremy Nagel says, put Ozuna at third. Screw it. That'll be the day. I think you're more likely to see a Freddie Freeman maneuver where you see Olsen at third and then you move Ozuna to first and maybe you put Soler at DH and get crazy with the outfield. I don't know. Duvall or something in the outfield. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see how this ages. Let's see. Sports Daily says clearly the options are Yuli Gurriel or Alejo Lopez at third. Luke Williams is not an option. We don't need another automatic out. I don't disagree. Don't disagree there at all. Dolphin Wolf says, I remember 2022 when we had to sweep the Mets to win the division, and they came through strong and were winning consistently. I've not seen anything that resembles that this year. Well, yeah, I mean, but again, in 22, you didn't have all these injuries. You had a terrible start to the season, right? Like the Mets got out to kind of like how the Phillies did. Got out to a great lead, a 10.5 game lead, and it was like, oh, man, that's tough. That's going to be a tough one to come back from. And then all of a sudden, magical things happen, and the stars align, and, you know, we shoved it down their throats, and we beat them, and, you know, almost gave Frank the Tank a heart attack. But at the end of the day, I think that could that kind of thing happen this year? I do think that. But again, I think it's more unlikely this year than I did a few years ago. I pretty much said, like, the longer it went on, in 22, the longer it went on that the Mets are slowly losing this lead, right? And the more I saw Mets fans, Frank the Tank, freaking out about it, the more I was like, you know, this is possible. This is possible. And then it came down to that 3-game series, and it was like, all right, put them up. Let's see what happens, you know. And all of a sudden, Braves won it all and won the division there shortly after. All right, last question of the night, then I'm getting out of here. Miguel Freaka, hey, Tyler, Braves have 4 players who can't hit in clutch situations. Is that something you can't teach? Who are they? You know, guys, who are they? Look, I mean, here's the thing, right? It's easy, I think, to point at players and criticize. It's really easy. It's almost easier than pointing at a manager and criticizing. These dudes do one of the hardest jobs in sports, to hit a baseball at 100 miles an hour. I know people who can't play MLB The Show, you know, and then those same people like to go criticize actual major league hitters. Look, it's a hard game. It's a tough game. And in terms of who can't hit clutch, who can't do this, you know, I'm not going to criticize that. But I will say that we've had a tough time, not only this year, but the past 3 years, in knocking in runners. Runners left on base has been one of our worst stats as an offense. But, you know, it is what it is. As Dolphin Wolf put it, you come at the king, you better not miss. I completely agree. Guys, we're going to wrap it up with that. Thank you all for being here tonight. Really do appreciate it. You guys make the world go round here at On Deck. We really do appreciate you. If you're out there and you haven't liked the video, please do that. That really helps us get this out there to a bigger audience and make this a better conversation for next time. We're going to be on here at some point this week. More than likely Wednesday night, I may get on here following the second game of the Braves-Phillies series. I may get on here. It won't be tomorrow night. I'll be at the game, and that's just going to be impossible. But Wednesday night, I do plan to be here. So if you don't have any other plans, you know, come hang out with me. That said, I'll give you kind of my takeaways from the first 2 games. Thursday night is possible. No guarantees, but we'll see. If something big happens, I may jump on here late. But we will see. Definitely, I'm planning to go Wednesday night. But again, if you're at the game tomorrow night, it is Chick-fil-A bobblehead night. So make sure to go get your Chick-fil-A cow bobblehead. Swinging the baseball bat looks great. Make sure to go get your bobblehead there. And if you see me, Feel free to say hello. Would love to meet you. Would love to talk to you for a minute about some Braves baseball and all that good stuff. But if you would, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay up to date with everything going on here at On Deck and, of course, with your Atlanta Braves. One more thank you to go out to our sponsor, our presenting sponsor, Glenn Smith, Chevrolet GMC in Opelika. Get ready to smile. With that out of the way, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for liking. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the bell for notifications, and we'll see you next time right here at On Deck.
Baseball fans, make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. As always, thank you for your support.